Do you want to learn how rabbit pellets are made? Check out this episode of The Rabbit Show, where we go into a Belstra and Heinold Feeds plant to learn how ingredients are transformed into feed. Thank you to Heinold Feeds and Belstra for hosting us to be able to create this video. We're here at the Belstra administrative building in DeMont, Indiana, which is close to one of their where one of the processing facilities at, and then also close to Couts, Indiana, where all the rabbit feed is made. Joining me for this video is McKenna Lynch-Weiss, and I'm excited to have you here today. And we got a bunch of questions to learn about how feed is made.
Thank you. I'm excited to teach you all about how our products are made and how we ensure that the quality stays consistent.
And I think that's one of the things that is super important just to hit on right away is that what are the three most important things when you look at rabbit feed and the way that you guys kind of approach making rabbit feed?
Yeah, the three most important things when we're looking at any feed is quality, consistency, and freshness.
And why are those things important to rabbit breeders like ourselves? I mean, we both raise and show rabbits. Why does that matter?
All three of those things are directly contribute to the end product. So kind of the two main reasons why you would be raising rabbits would be for a meat purpose or a show purpose. And so all three, quality, consistency, and freshness, all contribute to how well you do on the show table and or the quality of the meat that you're producing for whatever the end user is.
When you guys are making feed, do you guys change the ingredients or change the recipe, or do you guys keep it consistent over time?
So all the diets are the same every time that a batch of feed is made. So there's kind of two different types of formulas. So you have an unlocked or an open formula that is primarily used for cost purposes. So things may change depending on how prices of ingredients go up and down. And typically that's used for someone that's wanting to keep costs as low as possible. And then you have the locked or closed formulas that the diets stay the same regardless of how the prices of ingredients change. And so all of our diets are the same. They're all locked or closed. So the diets or the recipes don't change with each batch of feed that's made. They'll all stay consistent, stay the same.
Tell us how something as simple as ingredients gets into making a pellet of rabbit feed.
Yeah, sure. So it's pretty simple on our end, maybe not for the end consumer because they don't quite understand, the full realm of what is done. But you have a diet that is made for a specific feed. So we're going to use like Orrin Reynolds for an example. We as a company don't have any nutritionists on staff. Tim talked a little bit earlier about how every dairy farm we works with has its own nutritionist. So we have an outside nutrition group that does nutrition for our pigs, for our rabbit feed, for our goat feed, our Evolution show feeds line. This nutrition group has expert nutritionists for each species. So the gal who does our nutrition for our rabbit feed line actually owns rabbits herself, has a degree in nutrition. Basically, we'll go to them and say, we're wanting these specific specs. Maybe we want to highlight these specific ingredients, put this inside the feed, and they come to us with a diet. Now that diet's going to have forages, grains, premixes. So when I say premix, what does that mean? A premix is a smaller inclusion ingredients, vitamins, minerals. It could be a mold inhibitor, anything like that. And so that could be anywhere from 5 ingredients to 35 ingredients, dependent on what that premix calls for. All of our premix for our feed is actually made at our own premix facility. So Lisa is buying all of the raw ingredients. We're taking those raw ingredients, formulating a premix that may go in a finished feed at, say, 10 to 25 pounds per ton. And then that is then mixed with large scale ingredients like an alfalfa, a wheat midds, a soybean meal, dried distillers grains, canola, linseed, anything under the moon. That then is put into a system which will spit out our feed tags. And that's why on some of our feed tags you'll see 16% protein or a 19% protein. That then goes into what we call a pelleting software or a feed mixing software. So before anything is ever pelleted, it's actually mixed as a meal. So if you've ever seen like a dry mash meal type mix, that's what every single product that's ever pelleted looks like before it's a pellet. So everything is weighed up, whether that is in a large scale ingredient bin, which would be like an alfalfa that may take 800 to 1,200 pounds. Let's just say that for an example. It'll weigh that up physically in a scale. And then you might have a micro system that may take products that are anywhere from 5 to 20 pounds. And then you're always going to have products that are hand added. So that's going to be physically hand added by a hand add technician. And he is literally taking a feed scoop and making and mixing all these different ingredients. And then he has a checklist that then the mill operator is double checking every batch. That's dumped straight into the mixer. And we have a procedure of mixing everything for a specific amount of time. We then add liquids, whether that be hand added or manually pumped from a pumping machine into the mixer, and then it's mixed again with all of the liquids. That is then sent into an overhead bin above a pellet machine. And a pellet machine is something that's going to take a meal or mashed product and turn it into the long cylinder type pellet that you may see. Now pellet machines have different die sizes. So you may have something like our rabbit feeds made on a 1/8 die, which is what people often refer to as a mini pellet. But then you also have something like our goat feed or our dairy feed pellets that are going to be on a 5/32 die, and that's going to be a little bit bigger. One question we get asked of often is, why are some pellets longer than others? So on every pellet machine, there is actually knives that as the meal is moving through the pellet machine, the die is a circle, and then it has a bunch of holes all the way around the outside. So as that meal comes in, it gets pushed through, and then there's knives that as that die is moving, the knives are actually cutting the pellets to a specific length, and that is set by the operator. So there's some mixes from custom farms that say we want really large pellets, some say we want short pellets, and then you can also make crumbles too. So the crumble is actually going to cause the pellet to break down into the small pieces, say like a layer pellet or a layer crumble. Same feed, same process. One's just getting crumbled after the pelleting process, and one stays pellet. So then from there you have basically three ways you can go with that mix, whether it's a meal, a mash, a pellet, or a crumble. That's either going to go into a bulk oversized bin that's going to be loaded on like a truck. So like our hog farms, it's all meal, it's all bulk. It's going to go into an overhead bin for the driver to just load the truck or the operator to load the truck. Otherwise, it gets sent to a bagging facility, which in our instance is usually right next to the mill. And that's going to be either tote in like a 2,000 pound tote, or it's going to be in a 40-pound bag, a 50-pound bag, whatever that specific ration calls for. And then on a lot of our bagging facilities, we have a kinds system, which is fancy and word for dust collection. And basically what that does is it's a sucking mechanism. As the pellets are coming through, it's actually sucking dust off of the pellet. Now that can be adjusted. We typically like to adjust it to right when it's moving through and it starts sucking some of the pellets. Then we back it off a little bit. That way we're not losing any of our end product. That's then getting sent through. It goes into what we call a hopper, and that hopper has a scale on it. So the bagging operator would then look on his machine and he would say, okay, my feed tag say that I need 50 pounds, 40 pounds. He would then adjust his machine to whatever that is calling for, and that scale is going to automatically know to weigh up that much product. And once that scale hits it, the bag will either, so some are a clamp mechanism on a bag. Some of them are like a chute that actually blows up. And so when it reaches that desired amount, it'll actually deflate and the bag will fall off, hitting the scale and then moving through. And then we all are manual sews, so it'll actually, an operator will be the one to hang the bag and then sew. And then we have robots after that. So the line, the conveyor will cause the bag to fall. It'll get the bag to exactly where it needs to be on the conveyor. And then the robot has specific programs that you can say, okay, we're doing 40-pound rabbit feed, so we know we need 50 per pallet, or we're doing 50-pound goat feed and we need 40 per pallet, and the robot does the rest. So it's pretty cool. We're looking forward to showing you guys a lot of the pelleting process, and also maybe some bagging and robot stuff too.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the entire thing. I mean, it's fascinating to think about how it goes from a meal into actual pellets and then into the bag, and then it comes to us. Let's take a deeper dive looking at each step into how to making rabbit pellets. We're going to kick it off with ingredients. How do you source feed ingredients?
First and foremost, we have to look at the formula that is sent to us or is created for us, and then look at the different types of vendors that are out there that have those ingredients. Do we have relationships with those ingredients or with those suppliers? Do they sell high quality ingredients? Do they fall in the lower spectrum where it could be questionable? If so, we don't even go anywhere near them. We're only looking for high quality ingredients. So we tend to stay with the same suppliers when we know that we have trusted suppliers.
Yeah, that makes sense. And having that consistency makes a lot of sense too. What are the main ingredients in rabbit feed?
Obviously, there's vitamins and minerals, but one of the biggest ones is the alfalfa, and that's definitely sourced domestically. We've used the same supplier for probably 15, 20 years, and they have fantastic quality, and that's part of the reason why we continue just to use that supplier solely for that ingredient.
Where do the minerals and vitamins come for when you're making feed? Is it here in the U.S. or is it overseas?
There's a broad range. Some things you get from domestic suppliers, but it is foreign material. Everybody has pretty strict standards as to what they will import in, and you want to go through that with them and make sure that they're following all the right protocols in terms of how it's handled, how it's brought, how long it's quarantined, and all those things are looked at before you even order from that supplier.
Are the minerals naturally sourced or are they synthetically made?
You're going to get some things that are found naturally, and then you're going to have other things that are man-made. Let's say more so of your minerals, like your zinc and some things like that are found in the earth, and those are mined.
Okay, so then, like, when you guys get something like that, I genuinely have no idea how this works. Is it like a rock? Like, what does it look like? And then you guys grind it up, or how does it happen?
In either powder or granular form.
Okay. And then you're grinding it to get what you need out of it.
No, that is what we need.
Oh, that is okay.
The suppliers are mining it and doing things like that, or say it's being mined in Wyoming. They're the ones doing the mining, and then they have actual companies that represent them that work on the shipping, and then you get it, and it's exactly how you need it for your feed.
So when you're doing the testing, you guys are testing the end product, but you guys are also testing the ingredients on the front end. Like, can you describe that process and why you do it?
Yeah, so we do some on-site testing of major ingredients. So the major ones right now that we're doing are soybean meal, bakery, corn, DDGs. Not all those are included in rabbit feed, but they're included in our other lines of feed. And we're testing all of the samples of those coming in here on site using an NIR machine. But then we send out samples monthly of all of the major ingredients to verify that the nutrients that we think are in there. And then we can also update our formulation program based on those nutrients.
One of the questions that we had from our viewers is, do you test for mycotoxins within feed?
Yes, we do. So we test all of the grain-based ingredients. We do some on-site testing as well as sending out ingredient samples for testing to an outside lab. And the frequency of testing that we do is dependent on the mycotoxins for that year. So it's kind of a fluid program. If we're seeing a lot of toxins, we'll test every load of feed coming or corn coming in or any ingredient, not just corn, that's an example, but kind of depending on the year.
Which makes sense. Different weather patterns or different things that go on cause them to appear. Is there something that why do you test for mycotoxins?
Mycotoxins are caused by mold, so it depends on the year. Some like really dry season, some like wet late season to develop, so it depends on the type of year. And then we test it because the molds affect the animals, different species in different ways. So we want to make sure that we're not causing any harm to the animals.
How do you read a feed tag?
So on a feed tag at the top, it'll have what the product is, and then we will have all the nutritional guarantees, and that's based on species, what we need to guarantee. And then below that will be the ingredients, and they're listed in the order of inclusion. So your highest ingredients at the start, down to your lowest ingredients. And it includes everything that is like an ingredient within an ingredient as well. So we kind of like to use the analogy of like chocolate chips. It's not just going to have chocolate chips on the formula, it's going to have everything that's in those chocolate chips. And that's usually why your ingredient list is so long. And then below that would be any feeding directions, anything special for that feed, as well as a lot number and anything associated with that feed.
Okay, so then diving into the lot number a little bit deeper. So like how does that work? Like is it like how would a person read that?
Yeah, so all of our feed is based on a 6-digit lot number. So it's a number that's 0000 and then there's a number. It's not, you can't tell the date of manufacture by that number, but it's the number that we use to trace the feed. So if anybody ever has a question on when a feed was manufactured, they can contact somebody, McKenna, John, any of us here at Belstra Milling, and we can look that up.
On the feed tag, why do some have a minimum listed but not a maximum?
All of that is based on what's required for the species. So some don't need to have a maximum, some don't need a minimum. So it's all based on what AFCO decides is necessary for that species.
Okay. And then why is the feed tag so important and what does it guarantee?
So the feed tag is really important because it tells you exactly what you're feeding your animals. So if you're shooting for a certain percentage of protein or fat or fiber, you're knowing exactly what they're getting. And it guarantees what that feed is. So if we want to test a feed and we want to see if it's going to match its feed tag, we'll test for those guarantees and we're able to check back and make sure that everything is in line.
When you guys say testing feed, what does that mean and what does it look like?
So when we test feed, we do a couple different things. We can do some tests here on site where we can test pellet durability, how durable pellets are. We can test moisture, but then we can do things like sending out a sample to the lab and testing to make sure it's following the guarantees. Or if we're worried about mycotoxins, we can test for toxins. So it's kind of dependent on what the concern is and then what we can test for.
And then how often do you guys test a batch of, or test feed?
We do periodic testing just to make sure everything is following in line. But then if there's ever concerns from a customer, we can test that as well. So it's really kind of a not one answer, it's kind of fluid. But we retain all of our samples for a minimum of 3 months.
That was one of the questions too that comes up is how long is the feed tag analysis guaranteed for?
So all of our feed is guaranteed for 3 months, and that's what FDA and AFCO require you to keep your feed samples for, and then that's what we guarantee all of our feed for.
On the freshness of feed, how does it change over time? Like, does it get lower quality over time?
So over time, the vitamins will start to degrade, but that takes a long time. We use different products in the feed to help maintain freshness. So we're trying to preserve those vitamins, minerals, nutrients as long as we can. And they're definitely good within that 3 months that we guarantee the feed. But it also, a lot of it depends on how the product's stored. So we suggest that it's stored in a cool, dry location, and that's going to help maintain the best quality. Once you get into warmer, more damp environments, you open the risk for mold, and that'll start to degrade the quality of the feed quickly.
Very good. And me being a novice in terms of like feed testing, what does that actually look like? I mean, is it in a microscope? Are you like testing the volume of something? Like, how does that actually look?
So an outside lab they'll grind down the pellets into a meal form, and then they'll use, most commonly it's called an NAR. It uses like infrared light, and it'll test the nutrients. Certain things like vitamins need to use wet chemistry testing, but they have different machines that'll run that and test those. We don't have a lot of those different things that we can do on site, which is why we use a lot of outside labs to do that testing.
And then, does a rabbit get the exact same nutrition in every single bite?
Yes, so they do. And we test our mixer efficiency to make sure that every bite pellet is the same consistency. So we test and take 10 samples out of one batch of feed and make sure that each sample tests within the same nutrients. We test for manganese, and we want to be under 10% of variation, and we are always much under that.
Very interesting. When you say a batch of feed, like, does that mean is like a batch of feed like one day, or like how wide is that range?
So a batch of feed is how much will fit in the mixer at one time. So up at Couts, I believe it's 2 ton can fit in the mixer at one time.
Heading out to the premix facility where the vitamins and minerals are mixed to get ready to go into the feed. All right, so we're inside the mill room where they combine all the ingredients for the feed. And explain to me what's going on with the screens.
Yeah, this is our bins. Then it goes down through the pipe into the feeder. This is our feeder, and this is our conditioner. So from the feeder, it goes down into the conditioner. The conditioner feeds it into our big pellet mill. And the big pellet mill goes through the air line, which feeds it into the cooler. And the coolers they'll sit for maybe like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then just cool down, make sure they're not too hot. And then from there, it goes down to the feeder again, and goes through our conveyor and up the leg, through the screener to shake out the fines. The fines get fed back into the feeder, and then it feeds into our distributor, which distributes it to whichever thing you choose.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
That's how it's actually getting mixed.
Yeah, so all the raw ingredients will fall in there. It's a double ribbon mixer. So there's one here and one there, and it'll mix it in there. It'll get dumped. This is your scale.
So all the ingredients, okay.
All the ingredients are scaled together.
Yeah.
And then once it's all done, they'll all drop in there at the same time.
Gotcha.
And then it'll mix together, all of it together.
Gotcha.
I can see.
Holy cow! I see what you mean, that's full. I'm glad we got to see it when it was empty. Next up is pelleting.
Down, heat comes into here, and then a big guy. So that's what would happen if there was no knives.
The diameter of the pellet and length is appropriate for then rabbit feed. After the pellets are cut, they go into a bin for cooling to get ready for the bagging
Okay,
process.
so we're now at the bagging location, and you can see over here in front of me there's like a spout looking thing. That spout, when running, we're going to have a floor pedal on the ground. When that floor pedal is pushed, that spout will actually inflate, and that's what's going to hold the bag in place as the product is coming through the bagger. On that box over there, you can kind of see some screens. That's where they're going to set what packaging they're currently running, which is going to go ahead and automatically program what bag size the scale should fill. So they can do 20 pounds, they can do 30, basically 20 to 50 on this bagging line here. But once it's filled and it gets the desired weight, that thing will automatically inflate and the bag will drop. All these conveyors will be on, and here you can see our hand sorter. So they'll have tags up there, we're going to sew it, and then this large steel triangle is actually another dust control, so it'll suck product off the bag, and just as the product's going through, it'll actually just suck up any type of dust or material that's falling out of the shoe. It'll work its way down through the conveyor, all the way over here to this corner, and once it gets to the corner, that's when the robot starts kind of kicking in, and there's a large flat piece that will actually get the bag in the position that the robot needs it to be, and then you can kind of see through the fence over there. We'll get a better shot, but the bagger has a robot here in this facility, so the robot's capable of filling 2 pallets before an operator or forklift driver has to come and remove them, and the robot is fully programmed to stack both pallets, and then it will pause knowing that both of those pallets are complete. It does offer the option for filling the first, going to the second, and if we have a forklift driver available, we'll be able to go through, pull that pallet out, and then hit the green light so the robot can go ahead and start, so there's no downtime, as long as we have enough people on the job.
How does rabbit feed reach rabbit breeders?
So we utilize a network of dealers across the country that I work with to order whichever formula breeders want, and so they place an order, and primarily through our customer service team, and that kind of triggers a demand, and from there feed is made and then shuttled over to our distribution center, where it's either put on route trucks if it's local, kind of within a tri-state area, or it's shipped via LTL carriers to further destinations throughout the country. And then our team communicates with the dealer and says, hey, your order's going to be picked up on Tuesday, and it should arrive to them in 2 to 3 days or whatever the time frame may be. And then as soon as it's there, that dealer is able to then process that and put it on their floor. So everything happens very quickly from when an order is placed. Typically it's picked up within just a day or 2 at the most.
So as we're looking at the feeds, I know one of the most common questions that our viewers ask is, how do you guys transition the feed when you're going from a different species into rabbit feed and then from rabbit feed into a different species?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's a pretty common question when you have a facility that's going to be manufacturing like a rabbit feed, a chicken feed, a pig feed, because every species of animal calls for different nutrition. In this instance, in our case, with having our Couts facility, we have 2 pellet mills there. And we've made it to where 1 pellet mill is for rabbit feed and 1 pellet mill is for chicken feed. So that chicken feed is actually our Nature Serve line that's sold through Ace Hardware, Rural King. It's essential oil poultry, backyard poultry feed. But on the rabbit side, anything that's strictly Heinold is going to be made through the other mill. So it's super important for us to make sure that there's no cross-contamination. We're all human. And so the facility that the rabbit feed is made in, when the pellets are made, they fall through the floor, and that is open, and both are next to each other. So if there's ever an instance that there might be some cross-contamination, we're always willing to jump in and take care of that. We're all human, mistakes happen. I like to preach to people and all of my customers is it's not the problem that occurred, but it's how we handled the problem. And then another thing we do is, obviously when the pellet machine kicks off, it's going to be cold. And so pellets require steam. That's how we do all of our pelleting. It's a steam press. So we basically inject steam and heat to create moisture in the mash feed, which allows the pellets to go through the die and create shape. So typically our pellet machine will run about 140 degrees. And just real quick, another thing people ask is, how are ingredients, do they lose any volatility through that process? A lot of the ingredients, or I should say all the ingredients that are used in our pelleting feeds have that common use. A lot of facilities use these ingredients, and as ingredient suppliers are manufacturing those ingredients, they're putting that into their mind of we need to make sure that they're encapsulated, they're heat tolerant, that we're not going to lose any of that through the process. So back to the pelleting and the bagging side of things though, when we manufacture feed, that first few bags, there may be a little bit more fines because the pellet mill hasn't quite got up to heat or up to spec. So in order to do that, we usually take the first 5 to 10 bags and dispose of them. And that helps with making sure there's no cross-contamination between batches, whether it's general going to Orin or Orin to family. Usually the first 5 to 10 bags are disposed of, and that's also going to help with any smaller pellets, loose pellets, fines, as the pellet machine gets heated up to start.
So so even though it's rabbit feed, it's still switching between the different brands within it or the different types within it. Do you do anything else then beyond that, or is it just the fact that you're discarding those 5 or 10 bags? Like, do you put a cleaner feed or something like that in there?
Yeah. So we actually used to do that between batches, just to make sure that the die was clean, conveyors were clean. We would run through like crimped oats or cracked corn is pretty coarse, so it would allow for it to clean, augers and conveyors and belts. But we've had a lot of complaints about maybe some corn type looking pellets or pieces of corn or oats in their feed. So that's where we've gone back to, we can take a past, the first bag or two, throwing that through as the cleaner and then throwing it out at the beginning of the batch. That's our way of, using a rabbit feed as your cleaner, but then also disposing of it as it gets to the bagging line.
So rabbit feed is getting more and more expensive. How does a breeder pay less for feed?
So typically what I like to tell people is you pay for quality. You pay for consistency, you pay for freshness. Our rabbit feed in Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky is going to be much more cost affordable for a breeder than it will be in, say, Alaska, California, Texas, Florida. But the hard thing is, yes, cost of rabbit feed is getting more, but what is not getting more right now? That's where I have to ask people, are you paying more in gas? Are you paying more in just transportation in general? So when we look at, yes, feed's getting more expensive, but we also have to look at getting from point A to point Z is getting more expensive too. And that's where as a company, we've struggled a lot in the past of, do we switch things and put out a statement of, do we switch our alfalfa? We could switch our alfalfa tomorrow and put a post out on Facebook and say, hey, we're doing this. But that would go against our standard of quality, consistency, and freshness because we've had success with the alfalfa that we're using. And personally, I think that it means more to a breeder to pay more to know that the rabbit's getting that. And there's things that we've done as a company to try to limit that. I will say, with true transparency, the amount that we make on rabbit feed now is less than what we made 4 years ago. And that's because we care about our dealers, we care about our friends in the rabbit industry, and you have to look at quantity over price. Would I rather sell 5,000 units or would I rather sell 100 units at more cost? Personally, I'd rather sell 5,000 units because you get more friends doing it that way. You have a little bit more fun. So, as a company, we struggle with that too because our costs are more. Our transportation and get the ingredients here is more. And then it's just trying to find the happy medium of making it at an affordable cost, but also as a business being able to fund that. So that's a good question.
When you're storing feed, what are the best practices that you can do as a rabbit breeder?
So we always recommend that feed is stored in a cool, dry place. Some people may open up their bags of feed and pour it into a bin of some sort. I usually try to recommend to people that that's airtight so that we're not, just storing it in an open bucket for days on end, because the humidity and the moisture in the air will affect the pellets if they're just left to the elements. So we try to keep it stored in a cool, dry place and airtight if the bag is opened.
And so so you're saying that even being in the same building, that there's a difference from it being in the bag versus it being in something that's not airtight.
Yes. There's a very big difference between just kind of storing them out in the open and then storing them in an airtight container or in the bag. So if it's not in the bag, again, we want to be airtight because that bag does provide them a lot of shelter from the elements and from the humidity.
Okay. And then I know we asked it earlier, but just reiterating that, how good or how long is feed good for from the time that it's processed to when you're feeding it?
So we guarantee our feed for 3 months. How good it is very dependent on how it's stored as well, though. If it's in a very humid environment, you're going to want to watch that 3-month mark. If it's stored in a cool, dry environment, it could be better for longer.
So when we're looking at feeding rabbits, how much do they need to eat?
So generally, the rule of thumb is an ounce per pound of body weight, but this is very individual dependent. So I always like to tell people to kind of keep an eye on them. So if you see that they're not gaining like they should, or if they're gaining too much, then we can always adjust that. It's very individual, but the general rule of thumb is about an ounce per pound of body weight.
And what factors go into that? Like, I mean, is the age of the animal? Is it they're part of the life cycle if they're having babies?
Yeah, so you're probably going to feed a show rabbit a little bit differently than how you feed a breeding animal. So perhaps when you're breeding does, you don't want them quite as finished as you would a show rabbit. So we're going to take all those factors into account and again just try to feed them to what you're trying to do with them. So a show rabbit you're really going to push the feed to and try to make them look their best for the show, whereas a brood doe you might pull back a little bit so that she's ready to have babies.
First, can you describe what limit feeding versus free feeding means?
Yeah, so when we're free feeding, we're giving the animal all that they would want to eat. So we are basically filling their feeders up and letting them eat whatever that they would want. Whereas if we're limit feeding them, we're limiting them to 8 ounces or 6 ounces or 4 ounces of feed per feeding.
Okay. And what are the benefits of either program?
So with limit feeding, you're able to know exactly what they're getting per day. And it's also allowing your feed to not sit in the feeder too long, which is important when we get into the humid summer months, especially more humid climates. So limit feeding, you can definitely tell how much they're eating. Free feeding also, though, allows them to eat whatever they want, especially for those picky eaters that don't always want to eat right away. So you're going to put a lot of condition on them pretty quickly.
Okay. And so when you're, how does the rabbits like age in their life cycle when they're young versus when they're maturing and then they reach show shape and then they're breeding? Like, how would your feeding recommendation change through their life?
Yeah. So as they're young and growing, you may want to free feed them. Try to get them to grow as quickly as possible and get them up to show shape. And then once they get on the show table, you may limit feed them so that you know exactly how much they're getting and you can kind of tweak it. So if you're giving them 6 ounces and then you decide, well, I'd like to put a little bit more condition on them, you can always up it to 8, where it's a little bit harder if you're free feeding them and you don't know how much they're getting. If you need to if they're getting too conditioned, you need to pull back a little bit. It's hard to know where that fine line is. And then as they get older, of course, you may need to adjust even further from that. So perhaps you need to full feed them because they're just not holding their condition anymore. It just changes a lot throughout their life.
Okay. And then when you have a doe with a litter, is that something that makes sense, like on free feeding or limit feeding?
So primarily, we're going to probably free feed them. Again, if you have a doe that's got eight kits with her, you're going to want to free feed them, try to get those babies growing, try to keep that doe in condition as she's feeding out those babies.
Okay, so when we're thinking about feeding supplements, you guys have a variety of different supplements available. Why does somebody feed supplements?
So there are a lot of different factors with supplements. So we offer sort of a textured supplement that's got all sorts of different things in it. It's got oats, sunflower hearts, it's got all sorts of things. And then we have just a pelleted supplement as well. Supplements are very individual based. So some people like to feed them and some people don't think that they're necessary. So ultimately you kind of decide what's best for you. We offer several different types for people to choose from, but ultimately it would be up to the breeder to decide, yes, I'm going to feed them, and or no, I'm not going to feed them.
Yeah, very good. And it comes down to what they believe in and how what that rabbit needs at that point in time in of its life. I mean, I know that most people are feeding supplements as a way to help finish a coat or something like that, or get the rabbit in prime before a show. But what were the supplements you guys had?
So we have our Doc's Rabbit Enhancer, which is a pellet supplement, and then we also have our TNT, which has the Doc's pellet in it, but it's more of a textured based supplement. So it's, like I said, it's got the oats, it's got the sunflower hearts. And so that's actually, like, you can see everything that's in that. So those are our two supplements.
With Heinold, I know that Doc's Rabbit Enhancer has been a product that's been used for decades by a lot of different rabbit breeders. And then here a couple of years ago, you guys came out with TNT, and it's definitely been something that a lot of breeders have had a lot of success with, winning at the national shows and state shows and at different county events across the country. Is there anything coming out anytime soon or anything in the works?
There's always lots of projects, but we have been trialing a supplement. I've been trialing it. We've been trialing it with others as well. We've had great results with it. So more information soon.
All right. So what should a rabbit breeder do if they felt like something was wrong with their feed?
So if they're thinking something could be wrong with their feed, we would like a picture of the sample, as well as we'll need the lot number that's on the bottom of the tag and the type of feed. So it's the 4-digit number, or 4 zeros, and then followed by a 6-digit number, and that's how we can track those numbers or that feedback in our system. Once they have that information, they should contact their dealer, and then the dealer will contact someone here, and we'll get that sorted out and take a look into that.
That follows up the next question of what does Heinold do when a complaint comes in?
So when a complaint comes in, we will look up that batch number or that lot number of feed, and we'll take a look at the batching records, make sure everything was added as according to our specifications, and then we'll pull our routine sample, take a look at that, because we do keep those routine samples of everything that goes out the door. And then from there, we'll decide if the feed needs to be further tested, and we'll send that out for testing, or how to handle that complaint.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah. Okay, so when you're doing testing, why do you use a third party to do the testing and to ensure that your guys' results are accurate?
So like you said, we want to ensure that the results are accurate. So we're using a third-party source to verify everything, as well as they have a lot more equipment than we do on site. So they can run all sorts of different tests depending on what the concern or complaint is. So nutrient testing is one type of equipment, where vitamin testing is a completely different process. So we have the ability to test all sorts of different things by using those outside sources and have valid results.
Let's learn about Belstra's history and how they became partnered with Heinold Feeds. I'm excited to be with Tim here and to focus on Belstra history and how your feed company has grown over time, consistently staying though with your guys' family values and having it be an employee-owned operation. So interested in hearing though about how you got started in the feed business and then how you guys have grown.
Well, you have to go back to 1954 is when my dad was drafted in World War II, and a man by the name of Neil Caper owned a feed business here in town. And Neil told Dad, "Bud, you've always got a job here." So Dad went off to war, met Mom, California girl, came back here, got married, came back here, and went back to work and worked for Neil for several years. And he had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit in him, and he didn't want to work for somebody else the rest of his life. He wanted to have his own business. So Dad and Mom started looking at other companies, one thing or another. And Neil heard about it one day, and he says, "Bud, are you thinking of?" Yeah, he says, "We are." And he says, "Well, why don't you just buy me out?" And so it began in September of 54. And so Belstra Feed Sales was started and grew. And back then he was a Pillsbury dealer. And in 1960, there was a man named Paul Bowman who had a feed mill. A lot of towns had feed mills, little feed mills. And Paul had a Purina franchise. And so they used to trade ingredients back and forth. One day he says, "Bud, why don't you just buy me out?" So in 1960, Dad bought Paul out, and we became a Purina. Pillsbury was getting out of the feed business. Purina was going and growing, so it was a very good thing. It was the era of the caged layer growth, which was just in its infancy, but just went through a dramatic growth and then a dramatic decline. That was one of the first industry that consolidated so much. But anyhow, it was a big part of our company's growth back in those days. So, yeah.
Very interesting. And then as time's gone forward, how you guys have grown or continue to grow and acquiring Heinold Feed, I know recently, but, for the rabbit line. But how has that growth been after that period of time, after like the 70s?
So, when we, I got to stop and think, was it 2016 when we acquired Heinold? Something like that. And they had a very established rabbit pellet business. Virgil Heinold, who started that company, was like my dad way back in that era, so they knew each other for years. But anyhow, they had a very established rabbit pellet business, and then we started to grow with that. John got involved with it and grew it, and it's a smaller mill. It's a 1960 era's mill, but makes a beautiful product. Got good people, so yeah.
And I like too that it's right here with or close to your guys' other plant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's 25 miles perhaps, something like that from us, but not very far, So most of our business for years, after the chicken business in the 60s kind of came and went, then pig business really took off and grew. And somewhere along the line in the late 80s, we got associated with a genetics company called PIC, Pig Improvement Company. And we were selling their boars, and they were looking to have a gilt multiplier built. And we didn't know what that was. And so my dad, my brother, myself, and our outside salesman took a 3-day trip into Michigan and looked at several farms and came home, and that was the start of Campbell-Ott Swine Breeders. That was the first farm that we built. Today we have 6 of them, but that set a whole nother course for us too. The chickens died off and the pigs went nuts for years, and then right around 2000 the dairies moved into our corner of the world, and so we got to know the dairy business. But it's all been part of it. It's all part of the growth and everything else.
And you guys have been, so you guys are servicing the feed, though, for several different species of animals.
Yes, yeah. Actually, we probably piddled around trying to make feed for a little bit of everything. We do some specialty stuff. Rabbits are specialty stuff. We do boar goats, feeds, just whatever's out there, the dairy things are different, each one of them. Dairy has its own nutritionist, so there's not two of them that have the same feed, and it constantly changes. Pigs are much more stable, as far as diets and things like that, but, if it's not illegal, we'll try and make it for you if you want it.
What's led to your guys' success? Like, is it that you guys have been employee owned and that like everybody feels vested in wanting to be part of the overall success of the company, or how does that work?
The ESOP, which came about in 2006, was a continuation. My father started something called a profit sharing plan way back in 1971, which predates ERISA, actually. And so there's always been a bit of a culture in our company of, if the company does well, then you too are rewarded with that.
How are you guys set up? Like, how does somebody get feed from Heinold Feeds?
So the first place to check would be our dealer directory, which is on our website. That's heinoldfeeds.com.